Hey, hi. I'm Ed Falco, and I'm going to be reading some poems from my collection from LSU, X and a Tickseed. But we're going to give it a minute or two before we get started, in order for everybody to get here. So I'm just going to look at you. Actually, I can't see anybody out there, but we'll hold on a minute. I'm here in Blacksburg, Virginia. It's a sunny day. I'm up in my study where I work. And I'm looking forward to reading some poems. I think we'll be ready to start in about 1 minute. Okay, I think we're getting there. All right, it looks like we're ready to go. Okay, my name is Ed Falco, and I'm going to be reading some poems from X and the Tickseed. This is my second collection from LSU, and that photograph on the cover is a beautiful picture by the photographer Russ Morris. So X and the Tick will be out in a couple of weeks officially, but it's already available. Let me start by thanking you for being here. I assume at least I hope there are a few friends of mine in the audience, some of the poets and writers I admire and already asked to come and join us. And I hope there are a few people in the audience who I don't know at all. And I want to thank you especially for being here and allowing me a chance at this introduction. For those of you who don't know me, well, at first I want to thank the folks at LSU, especially James Long and Sonny Rosen and James Wilson and Ashley Gilley and the whole team there at LSU have been so great to work with in the process of publishing this collection. So thank you all very much. And then back to those of you who don't know me. I'm a multi-genre writer. I write novels, stories, poems, plays. And then within those genres, I write in subgenres. So I'm kind of all over the place as a writer. But poetry was a first love, and it remains the genre I read most frequently. And there's probably never been a time in my life when I haven't been writing poems. Sex and the Tick Seed is my second collection from LSU, and as I said, it'll be out on January 30th. Most of the poems in the collection are some combination of memory and experience and the internal thinking of a poem itself, the mysterious process that arises out of the combination of sense and sound and language, sometimes pushing a poem in mysterious directions. But this first poem I'm going to read, in the Kentucky Mountains, is very much a poem that comes out of memories. It's based in an experience from when my daughter was still a little girl, and I was looking for a job at the time, and I was at the MLA conference in Chicago, and it was a very snowy day, and I wanted to get home in time for Christmas, so I took a shortcut through the Kentucky mountains on the way from Chicago to Virginia, which turned out to be a very bad idea, as my car wound up trying to go through what I thought was a puddle, but turned out to be actually a river overflowing its banks. And this poem is in the Kentucky mountains is pretty much a rendition of what happened when I did that. So in the Kentucky mountains, this is where I came around a curve, found black water pooled, where the road dipped, blacktop disappeared, the moon rose, its pale light reflection flashing on the surface of the water. This is where I tried to drive through water, only to discover its depths. My car floating seaworthy as a boat, before water found its way through, dark and cold and quickly rising above the dashboard to the windows. This is where my car turned a slow circle under fast-moving clouds, where I rolled down my window, climbed onto the roof, where I waited wet and cold, surrounded by mountains and woods. I thought myself fully alone, marooned and slowly sinking. When I fell back to see the stars overhead blink between clouds, the moon peak and disappear, black water rush to the tree line. Before 3 swinging lights appeared, as if among the constellations, before they turned out to be oil lanterns descending a steep hillside, the gait of those who carried them measuring their sweep and swing. Before a family who lived in a nearby cabin threw me a braided rope, before they hauled me out of water onto the blacktop road, before they swaddled me in a coarse blanket and took me into their home. This is where they fed me hot milk and honey, found me dry clothes, where they made me a pallet, and this is where I slept the long night before they drove me to town on a morning streaming bright sunlight. This is where we live, in just such a world. This too. So that poem for me is a reminder that even when things look dark and miserable, the world is full of good people. And they're there when you need them. And they can be there when you need them. And they certainly were there on that occasion. This second poem is titled The Ruined Garden. And it's another poem rooted in memory. I was lucky to be with my mom when she passed. She was in her early 90s. And this poem comes out of that experience of having been there for that, and also for the memories associated with it. The Ruined Garden. We counted the silence between breaths and waited. Soon, we were told, very soon. Her slivered body waited to stillness, her searching eyes blind. 4 of her 5 children in a circle around her, the girls holding her hands, the boys at her feet. What would we find could we step behind her shuttered eyes? A garden in summer, her husband at her side, holding a dirt-crusted trowel, and she with a flowering lily cupped in the palms of her outstretched hands. When I was still a boy, and the 2 of them would live forever. Sun bright on our green, precisely mown lawn, the bright array of their tenderly attended garden, the hen and chicks, the bleeding hearts, purple salvia, ornamental grasses, angel's breath, and row upon row of marigolds, zinnias, daylilies, and more than I can remember. And this, the morning I helped her plant a row of bright red flowers, poppies maybe, delicate red petals and black center. A child in my mother's arms after the sky darkened and clouds tumbled over roofs, then thunder, lightning, a screeching wind, an outburst of hail, and I cried for the lost morning's work, for the garden ruined, for the red petals stripped, plants beaten to the ground. Her lips at my ear, whispering to her child, there's no need for tears. Everything's only beautiful for a little while. Another poem that comes out of a memory. Throughout the collection, there are several essay poems posing as essays or essays posing as poems, whichever you prefer, but they're poems that take advantage of the essay form as a more discursive kind of writing, in which you can explore subjects. So there are several essay poems in which I think about works of art that have been significant to me, or stories that have been special or had a special place in my life. And the one I'm going to read now is an essay on Frank O'Connor's The Guests of the Nation. And that story has just been crucial to me in so many ways throughout my life. It's one of those stories that kind of changes you after you read it, or at least it changed me after I read it. And I'll pretty much, if you haven't read Guests of the Nation, I highly recommend it. But the poem itself, it pretty much explains the story. So it looks like this on the page. So it's formatted as a poem, but I'm playing with the essay form. Essay on Frank O'Connor's Guests of the Nation. It's the ending that crushes me with every reading. After the Irishman Donovan executes Hawkins and Belcher, his British prisoners, the narrator, Bonaparte, tells the reader that anything that happened after that night in the bog, after shooting those British boys they had been holding captive for many months, and with whom they had become friends, after their bodies lay stiffening in the lantern-lit patch of muck and ageless bog, anything that happened to me afterwards, I never felt the same about again. Days earlier, the British had executed 4 Irish prisoners, one of them a boy of 16. And so the Irish ordered Hawkins and Belcher executed in return. This was the 1919 Anglo-Irish War, or the Irish War of Independence. Bonaparte was fighting for a free Ireland. Had he refused the order, he would have likely been executed as a traitor. Sympathetic as I am to Bonaparte, who comes across as a decent man and who argued hard against the shootings, he did do his part and finish off Hawkins with a second bullet. Among the several characters in the story is an old woman who keeps the cottage where the prisoners are being held. She takes care of the boys and falls to her knees in prayer when she sees what has been done. Steeped in superstition, she is in part a comic figure. She blames the long drought on Jupiter Pluvius and World War I on the Italian count that stole the heathen deity out of the temple in Japan, reasoning that nothing but sorrow and want can follow the people that disturb the hidden powers. I can't say why this story affects me so deeply. I came of age during the Vietnam War and resisted the draft. Then I pulled a high number in the lottery and never served. I knew the war poetry of Wilfred Owen and Rupert Brooke. I had Owen's Dulce et Decorum Est memorized. I had read Remarque's All Quiet on the Western Front, Trumbo's Johnny's Got His Gun, and Heller's Catch-22. I listened to Dylan sing Seeger's Where Have All the Flowers Gone, and Country Joe and the Fish perform their anti-war Vietnam song at Woodstock. There's something of that in my response to Guests of the Nation, something of the sorrow I feel for all who died in Vietnam, and my refusal to be among them, a refusal that altered the course of my life and possibly condemned someone else to die in my place. That thought is always with me. But there's something more, something that shatters when I read those closing lines and see Bonaparte out there in the night bog, where it was all mad, lonely, with nothing but a patch of lantern light between ourselves and the dark. When I see those boys bleeding out in the muck and the gun in Bonaparte's hand, within me something falls apart. It's war itself, I think, that rattles me, the fact of it, from which there appears to be no escape. I see bodies slowly sinking, a gun in someone's hand at the moment after a choice has been made, when a heartbroken old woman falls to her knees in a cottage and prays in the dying light to the hidden powers, and all things are forever altered, disrupted on into the future, unending, the bodies always falling, and nothing ever the same. I probably should have said before I started that when I raised my hand, I'm actually quoting from the story, from the story itself, but I hope you figured that out. This next one I'm going to read evolves entirely out of memory. It's one of my stranger poems, at least to me, in that the memory is real. When I was a kid, I grew up in Brooklyn, and the older boys and men used to gather up all the Christmas trees that were discarded after Christmas and bring them to a lot where they would set them on fire and create this huge bonfire of Christmas trees. And when I was really young, I don't know how old, 7, 8 years old, but two of the bigger boys who looked huge to me at the time grabbed me by the ankles and by the feet and swung me toward the fire, threatening to throw me in. I suppose they thought they were being playful, but I was utterly terrified at the time. And that memory has come back in dreams over the years. And this poem is just a recounting of the strange ways in which that memory has been transmogrified and changed. The title of the poem is Three Transmutations of a Memory. 1. After Christmas, Brooklyn night. In an abandoned lot, Christmas trees are set on fire. Older boys swing a younger boy toward flames. Overhead, stars flicker through a smoky haze, and the boy screams. Heat pushes against his face. His hair is singed. In the blazing night, he's transformed. Look, look, how high the flames leap, how the trees explode and roar, how the night burns. 2. Boy after the holidays. In the lot where they gathered discarded Christmas trees and set them ablaze, the towering big boys swung him toward the fire, where shrieking angels seethed. Holy voices crackled in his ears, wailed beneath stars dim in a smoky haze, while the big boys danced like dervishes, their laughter echoing prayers. 3. Where he finds revelations in the black hollows of the heart where the dark animals reign, where keening rises up like lamentations whipped and fretted until a sleek skin sheer as a birth call bursts. Light pierces smoke and shadow as injured creatures scatter in the presence of what emerges blazing to reveal boys as towering angels, the fire, their frenzied, ecstatic song. Yeah, so that's a kind of crazy poem for me. The memories are real. The way they get transmuted in dreams and in language is something I still find myself thinking about. So these poems are sandwiched between a sequence of X poems, and in which X is both me and not me. It's X, the variable, the mystery that can't fully be explained. Maybe X is you, maybe X is everybody. And the poems all look like this. They're all in this same form. Every one of them, they're short and they're all put together in the same way. So I'm just going to read a few of those in finishing up this reading, and then if anybody has any questions, we'll talk a bit. The first one is X and the Spider. This morning, X kills a small black spider in the kitchen sink, and the insignificance of its squiggly, rudimentary life causes him a brief pause, a second's momentary reflection. It's not just that little will be undone in this spider's absence, that not a single blessed thing of import will change. Rather, it's the thought of death's arbitrary nature. One moment, this spider scurries towards sun and glistening water, a tiny bubble of moisture on bright stainless steel that seems to vibrate in the open kitchen window's light. And the next moment, it's gone, erased. Nothing remains but a smudge, which X quickly washes away before going on about his everyday business. Around X, the countless stars shout their cosmic noise, their immense cataclysmic tumult, rollicking through the infinite and towering beyond, through endless stretches of nothing, through vast seas of everything, brilliant, exploding, crashing, destroying, and creating, all of it going on forever. X and death. X has spent a lifetime worrying about dying. He reminds himself of a child who starts crying upon entering a gaudy amusement park. All the rides, the parachute jump, the Ferris wheel, the wild roller coasters, plus all the other attractions, the haunted mansion, the mirrored maze. I don't want to go home yet, the child cries at the ticket gate. Please, he asks his mother, can we please stay? When his mother explains that they've only just arrived, the child is not placated. He cries and cries. He's stuck on what he knows is coming. When the ride stops spinning and the lights go out and it's time to go home. X crouches beside a shallow stream and looks at his reflection above the pebbles. His hair has turned gray, and under his eyes there are dark circles. Above X, white clouds drift lazily through an ocean blue sky. Below him, the stream murmurs a lullaby, and X leans down, kisses the moving water as if it were a departing lover. X in music. First, jazz. X's brother was a musician and a drummer, drum set taking up 2/3 of his bedroom. He played along to jazz in the big bands, Glenn Miller, Benny Goodman, Duke Ellington, Count Basie. He loved Ella Fitzgerald, Sarah Vaughan, Billie Holiday. X, still a kid, listened on the other side of the bedroom wall. Then folk, Bob Dylan, Pete Seeger, Joan Baez, Phil Oakes, graduating to blues, John Lee Hooker, Leadbelly, Howling Wolf, and on to the great jazz masters, Miles Davis, John Coltrane, Thelonious Monk, Bird. Thereafter, an eclectic mix, leaning always toward jazz. Roland Kirk, the great Wayne Shorter, the indomitable Charles Lloyd, but also Frank Zappa. And all along, the subtle music of words, from Emily Dickinson to Ted Ruthke, from Shakespeare to Mamet, the song of language arranged as music, in the end, X's great love. So many singers, so many songs, in every language, every medium, every culture, voices raised in celebration, sorrow, joy, grief, love, fear, always, even with death at the door, singing. In the last of these X poems I'll read is X in the Seasons. 1, X from his teens through his 30s. Yes to spring's reckless slash of color, and yes to summer's heat and shameless swaths of flowers wanton preening. Yes to fall's bright death announcements scattered everywhere, even to winter's white fist battering locked doors. Yes, bring it all, bring it. X revels in the season's provocations, in blazing heat and body-numbing cold. 2, X from his 40s through his 60s. X is still in love with the world, but often now he worries. Time moves like a magician, getting from here to there faster than can be reasonably possible. It makes no sense how fast time goes, pulling the hesitant body along without consent, dragging it, mumbling, through each swift season, as if X is cannonballing in free fall through time. 3. X in his 70s. Yes, again, because it's clear there's nothing anywhere to grasp, nothing to break winter's grip, never has been anything to slow the turning after luxuriant summer's impulsive heat, to hold off winter's final push before it all begins again, though in the beginning again is the spectacle and the marvel, fiery as ever. So, yes, he'll speak in wild favor and go out testifying. Okay, so that's a selection of poems from X and the Tickseed, the collection that will be out officially in January 31st. And I believe at this point, we'll take a break for anybody who has a question.
We will. Thank you so much for that lovely reading. Our first question is about something that you mentioned a few times during this reading. You said that a few of the poems were from memory. So our question is, what does it look like for you to turn a memory into a poem? How do you take the pieces of it, the details that you remember, and sort of convert that into a poem on the page? What does that process look like for you?
Yeah, well, of course, that's going to be different for every poet, but I can speak for myself. Most of my poems are grounded in memory and experience. So something that happens to me becomes the catalyst for a poem. Take, for example, the Ruined Garden poem. The memory there was of my mother working in the garden, which she used to do with my father, and the way in which they worked together to create this beautiful garden. So that's the memory, but the memory is not enough to be a poem. It has to through the process of language and through the thinking that comes out of the way sounds evolve, emerge into something that has meaning, at least has meaning to me. So in that case, I took the memory of my mother and father working in the garden. It got combined with another memory of my being with my mother when she passed. And the two of them together led me to this moment of realization that everything is beautiful, but only for a little while. So the beauty here is the memory of my mother, the garden, but also the sadness of her passing. So the two of them together, the memory gets modified by the process of writing the poem, which turns out to be about something. And in my case, it's about the transitory nature of life. That other part is crucial, where something has to happen that of significance that evolves out of the memory. So the memory is a starting place. I think it's probably true for most poets that the memory is, and for most writers, the memory is the place where the story, where the writing begins. But then you have to trust in the writing to take you someplace that's meaningful. At least for me, and for the kind of poetry I write. Obviously, there are lots of different ways to write poetry. But for me, memory is the starting place. And then you trust the writing and the language and the sound to evolve into something that's significant and has some power. In this case, in the Ruined Garden, the power is that last line that expresses the transitory nature of life and of experience. I hope that hope that helps a little bit.
It does. Thank you so much. Our next question kind of also relates to memory a bit. It's from Larry in the comment section. The question is, did you write as a child? Was it a natural act for you?
Yeah, no, I wasn't. I didn't grow up in a very in a household that prioritized reading and writing. I grew up in Brooklyn in a working class family, and reading was simply not one of the it's not one of the things that was a regular experience. Like I didn't get read to at night as a kid. And so I had to sort of discover reading on my own, which I did eventually, but I was already a teenager by the time I discovered writing. And then writing became an escape for me. Reading and writing became a great escape from the world. And I longed to be a part of that history and of that of those people that somehow told stories that were they're significant and meaningful. So I didn't grow up reading. I came to it kind of late, and I found in reading a great respite. The world around me, I didn't. I, the world around me as a kid was fairly brutal, and I found in writing some place where I could just uh, evolve into different worlds, or I could experience, not evolve, I could experience different worlds, and and I found a great kind of peace there, and spent the rest of my life trying to write stories as good as some of the stories that I first came upon. My parents, my father, when my older brother was born, bought a copy of the Harvard Classics, which wound up moldering in the attic. But I found it as a kid, and was reading Edgar Allan Poe and Guy de Maupassant, at age 13, just because those were the books I came across. And books always were this special world, place where I wanted to be.
Thank you so much. Our next question is kind of a tough one. So feel free to answer it as you like. It's from Mariana. Question is, you've always been a champion of new media and experimental writing. I'm curious if you think AI is a step too far, or is it just the next step in creative writing's evolution?
Well, first, hi, Mariana. So glad I can't see you, but it's so nice to know you're out there. Mariana is herself a poet and a good friend. Yeah, no, AI is, I feel threatened by it in the sense that I don't know what it's going to do to the future of writing. But for me, writing is always has always been, as I said in that last answer, a kind of way of living in the world. It's a way of exploring experience. So AI is of no use to me whatsoever because it's got nothing to do with me. Um, for me, the great joy of writing is the process of writing, and I'm not going to share that with a computer. I have no interest in sharing it with a computer, which is not to say that other writers aren't going to find interesting ways to use AI in the creation of stories, and novels, and more power to them. But writing has this special place in my life that's about me alone at my desk, making my way through memory, experience, and history and meditating on it. It's a daily meditation. And I don't want AI to have any part of it, but I wish AI and other writers all the best. But AI is never going to be able to give me a way of formalizing experience, putting it on the page, and escaping from it. Mariana, you know what I mean. A poem, a story, it's a way of creating experience, putting it on the page, and having a momentary escape from the trouble that led to the story, or from the whatever it is you're thinking about that you need to sort of get out of you for a while. So yeah, I don't know what AI is going to do. I'm not terribly enthusiastic about it. When I've played with it myself and asked, I asked AI uh, to give me a brief analysis of one of my own poems, and it just made up stuff based on the title. It was a total hallucination. And then I did it with some other poets, and also it got everything wrong. So I'm not the right person to talk to about what the benefits are of AI. I know it's never going to be important to me as a writer. I don't need somebody to tell me how to create a scene or to give me language. I don't want anybody to give me language. Language has to come from me to be meaningful. It has to come from me to be powerful. I don't want anybody else to, and I certainly don't want a machine to give me language. Best I can do, Mariana.
No, it's a great answer. Thank you. Thanks very much. Next up, we have a request that I don't think we've ever had somebody ask this before. Melissa is asking if you could read one more poem that's one of your favorites. So we have sort of a request for an encore, which has not happened before. If you are okay to read another one, we have a request for it.
Sure. Hi, Melissa. I've stacked the audience with my good friends. Melissa is, again, a terrific poet herself. So let me pick something. Let me pick something I was kind of a poem I was kind of hesitant about reading, but I'll go ahead and read it because it comes out of memory and dream. It's a combination of memory and dream, and it's titled "Girl on a Rooftop." Girl on a Brooklyn rooftop in Brooklyn. Excuse me, let me try again. Girl on a rooftop. Girl on a roof. See, this is what happens when you don't practice a poem before reading. Okay, Melissa, I'm going to give one more shot. Girl on a Brooklyn rooftop in moonlight. Her waltz-length white nightgown flurried by gusts of wind off the East River. One foot rests on the head of a gargoyle. The boy watching from his bedroom window is still unsoiled by lust, greed, ambition, anger, or terror. He's a child who awoke one night and went to his bedroom window, where he saw a girl in a nightgown on his neighbor's rooftop the instant before she dropped to the sidewalk, her waltz-length white nightgown swooping ever after through moonlight. Fire season in the West feels like the whole country is burning. I'm tired all the time, and sleep comes with great difficulty. Men are roused out of bed, papers are demanded. The donkey in my neighbor's field screams as if being molested. Goldfinches slash yellow flames to the flashy pink petals of a cherry tree. Refugees and their children are drowning. Sleep comes only with great difficulty. There must have been stories, though no one told me, a boy whose sensitivity worried his working-class family. In memory, her hair is dark and riffled by the wind. Her gown is white against faint stars in a black background. A bright full moon gazing overhead. The blue slate sidewalk below her is out of sight. It's late, past midnight. The lights are out in my parents' bedroom. Though they wouldn't tell me, they must have known her story. She has become for me an image and a mystery. The world goes on in its brutal way through gorgeous columns of light and shade. The executioner's children eat well and prosper. The murdered are felled and drop and assume grotesque postures spilled along city streets or remote mountain valleys, while she remains always on the edge of that rooftop, looking out overnight in the sleeping city, on the verge forever of slipping off into the moonlight, like love and suffering and sorrow and beauty. As I don't know if that's the poem you wanted, Melissa, but that was one I was thinking about reading. Thanks for asking.
Thank you for that. Was, like I said, that was our first ever poetry encore performance. So thank you for doing that. We've still got a couple more questions. Next up, we have Christina asking, what is the hardest thing to write when it comes to personal experience?
Well, I'm always wary about writing about experiences that are too dark. I tend to when I write, I remember some of the hard things, the difficult things, and sometimes it's hard to write about them, especially when one of the things that happens as you develop a life with friends and family who know you as the person that you present, right? So we're all somebody different to the people we present ourselves to. And I try hard to be the best person I can manage to be. But my stories are sometimes, and poems and memories are, they look at the dark side of things. They look at memories that are difficult to go back into. But that's what I find. That's what writing is for me. It's a release from those kinds of things. So some of those memories are difficult to write, but I find them necessary to write. They provide a formalization of feelings that allows an escape from those feelings. I write, sometimes I write about people in my life who I love, but my experiences with them may not have been good. I write about my father a good deal because I had a very troubled relationship with him. And I allow myself to write those things because I think that's what a writer does. Though sometimes I wish nobody I knew would ever read them. Um, I stopped sending books to my family. I'm wary about giving readings in public because it's not the self that I present to the world. I like the self that I present to the world. Maybe I'm not so crazy about the self that's buried. Boy, maybe that's a revealing answer. I'm trying to be honest.
No, that's a great answer. Thank you so much. Next question we have here is about something that's unique about this book that you spoke about a bit, the X as speaker. So can you talk a little bit about how that idea sort of formed for you of having this speaker X, and also maybe kind of the book's title and how that title sort of interacts with it?
Okay, so the book's title is one of the X poems called X in the Tickseed, and it's another poem that comes out of the thinking about my mother and gardening in this sequence of poems that that use both memory and music. I guess the poems are very formally constructed. I can't really explain the form. It evolved on its own, but it's a very, if you see the poems, I'll try to show you another one. The form is very specific. You can see that, you can see how it's sort of, each of them are very formally constructed. And one of the things that happens with poetry when you allow yourself to be constrained by form is that the language pushes you in directions you didn't expect to go in the when you started the poem. So these started as poems that were sort of experiences, things that happened, and that, as I said before, evolved into something that is a combination of memory and meaning. And X became, I just started writing this sequence, and there were 20, 25 of them. X became both me, as I remembered experiencing things, and also it became the mathematical symbol, X equals, what is the variable? What is the unknown quality? So X became both me in a lot of the poems, but also, I think in the best of them, it's that variable, that unknown quality. X is created out of the memory. And that's about it. That's about the most I can say about as far as I understand in the X poems. X equals me equals you equals everybody.
Thank you so much. And a question we always have to ask, again, we always say this, some of our authors don't like to talk about their next project just yet, but we'd like to know what you might be working on next. If it'd be similar to this project, different, something completely different, what's next for you creatively?
I'm actually working on more X poems, but this time not in that same form. I just finished a novel that I spent almost a year working on. And while that's being looked at by agents, I'm taking this space to go back into writing poems. And I'm motivated by this X possibility, the possibility of X as a character in these poems. And I find the poems are coming, but now I'm mixing up the forms. I'm doing sort of a variable internal rhyme scheme, sometimes as Petrarchan sonnets, sometimes as prose poems. I'm just sort of letting myself go all over the place in the form this time, but I'm still keeping that X as the character. So yeah, I've got about 6 or 7 of them that I've written in the last month or so. And I'm gonna just keep going. I'll keep going as long as the poems are there. But I've also been working on a play, and this is, I write every single day. So if you write every single day, for me at least, I need to kind of move around. And I've also been working on a play. So X poems and a play after having finished a novel.
Thank you so much. Well, that is our last question, so we can go ahead and say thank you and goodbye to the audience.
Thank you. Hey, thank you everybody who's here. A few of my friends I figured out by the names attached to the questions, but those of you who I missed, thanks for being here. And again, thanks for you who don't know me who are here. Thank you.